reached you through the transmission of scholars who took their knowledge from scholars all the way back to the Prophet. So this is an important thing. So the issue is not following the Prophet, but which body of scholarship do you follow, right? And for the people who make taqleed, we are following a sound chain of transmission, connecting ourselves to a mujtahid imams, which the ummah has all agreed on as being rightly guided and having the ability to understand and interpret them and derive rulings from the sunnah. And when we follow those, we are connecting ourselves to the rightly guided way of practicing this deen. All right, and this brings me to another statement. In my opinion, everybody does taqleed. That's what I really believe. Everybody does taqleed. It just matters on, or the issue is what you're doing taqleed on, who you're doing taqleed on. Because the Quran and Sunnah are so vast in their content and meaning, everyone must defer to some source of scholarship, be it a mujtahid imam, or some modern scholars or modern body of scholarship, or a single scholar of the past or present, or their own whims and understanding. And this is a very important point. For those people who say, I don't follow an imam, I follow the hadith, I would argue that they're actually making taqleed on the imams of hadith. Unless they can confirm and tell you that they're following that hadith and they actually did the due diligence to go and check every transmitter of that hadith in the chain to make sure that they were sound and they were trustworthy, and they did their due diligence to prove for themselves that that hadith is actually sound, and thus they've done that, they are trusting the opinion of a particular imam of hadith on their scholarship of that hadith. They're making taqleed on the imams of hadith, and they're following the imams in that opinion. So it really is a deception for people to say, well, I'm following the Prophet, or I'm following directly the Prophet because I'm following a hadith. You're not. You're just you're making your taqleed on something that's unconventional. You're following hadith as opposed to fiqh. All right, and the last kind of misconception that I've often heard is people say, if you have knowledge, if you have enough knowledge, if you understand the Quran and Sunnah, you don't need to do taqleed. Now, this is true. I would agree with this. If you do have knowledge, you don't need to do taqleed. But the question is, what knowledge does this include? Does it include just knowing a few verses, or having a translation of the Quran, or having a book of translations of hadith and reading them by yourself and with no connection to previous scholarship? Does this entail it? No, not at all. So the question to ask, what does this knowledge include? Well, logically, it would include all the knowledge that the imams, the mujtahid imams, had, right? Unanimously agreed by the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that these four mujtahid imams had all the requisite knowledge to understand and derive rulings for themselves. So it makes sense that you should have equal, if not better, knowledge than them in order to be able to not do taqleed on one of the imams. So what is that knowledge? The knowledge is absolutely and extremely vast. The knowledge that these imams had, and it is not something, we're not going to say it's impossible, but it is simply not something that any scholar has had since these times of the Mujtahid Imams. Knowledge of the Quran, knowledge of the Hadith of the Blessed Prophet, knowledge of the sayings of the Salaf Salihin, and how they agreed and disagreed in terms of the sayings, knowledge of the Arabic linguistics, knowledge of the qiyas, right? A person must have mastered all of these forms of knowledge before they can derive their own rulings or choose to follow the Sunnah according to their understanding. And conditions: mastering the knowledge of the Quran, the Hadith, the Ijma, right, the consensus of the scholars, knowledge of qiyas, mastering the knowledge of the difference of opinions, being able to weigh the difference of opinions from different scholars, and mastering the knowledge of classical Arabic linguistics. These are in themselves thousands of life pursuits. This is not something that is possible for the lay Muslim in our time to have mastered. Most of us, we're still trying to learn the basics of our deen. For us to even think that anybody, even scholars of our times, have the ability to derive directly the rulings for themselves without any connection to the madhabs is just not possible. So I've rambled on for long enough. My last slide, I just wanted to direct everybody to um, three really good YouTube links. One about following a madhab by Imam Zaid Shakir. Another one following a madhab where Sheikh Hamza Yusuf explains Shaykh Murabtal Haaj's fatwa on following a madhab, as well as an audio from Sheikh Ibrahim, which I've posted on my channel on following a madhab. I would encourage everybody again to definitely post their reasons for why they follow Taqleed. And if you come up with more reasons, post another one and continue and encourage all your friends and other people to support this initiative. I think if we get enough people to really kind of flood YouTube with these ideas, I think it will be very clear that we have something that can be really successful. Thank you very much for listening to my video. Assalamu alaikum.